Hi, this is Dominic Pace, who plays Gecko the Bounty Hunter from The Mandalorian, and you are listening to What a Piece of Junk podcast.
Hello, Space Junkies. Welcome aboard the Drunken Gungan. We are proud to bring to you another episode of What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast right here on the Fandom Podcast Network that is dedicated to covering everything Star Wars. I mean, Disney products, the original expanded universe, the OG Star Wars trilogy movies.
Whoa. Wait a minute, Scott. The Drunken Gungan. So
that's right.
That's officially it, huh?
That's officially it. The poll has ended as the time that y'all are listening to this episode, and the Drunken Gungan is the winner of the Name a Ship contest. So our very own YT-1300 class freighter is now officially christened the Drunken Gungan.
All right. So
well, we tried to christen it.
Yeah.
Well, instead we just filled it up, right?
Exactly. Yep. This week we are celebrating the name by hanging out in a cantina on Naboo because they know a thing or two about Gungans and drunken ones at that.
Yes, and as we continue to drink more, we might speak a little, Gungan-ish, Jar-Jar-ish.
A little Gunganese.
Yeah, there you go.
Misa, so glad to have you listen to the show. All right. Anyway, but yes, we are very glad.
Never do that again.
We are very glad to have you listening to this episode. This is episode number 30, which is Let the Cards Fall, our little tribute to the best of Star Wars gaming. Big-time geeks out there who are part of our podcast audience will likely know and probably lament the fact that today, we're recording on July the 30th, in the year of hell, 2020, we should have been hanging out in Indianapolis, Indiana, for GenCon, the world's largest tabletop and gaming convention. But sadly, like many things this year, GenCon for 2020 was canceled due to the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. Nathan and I would definitely have been there. We had made plans. We had reserved tickets. We had all these ideas about cosplaying with myself, my sons, and even my dad was committed to cosplaying for this year at GenCon. Derrick, were you planning to go? Would you have been in Indianapolis today?
Yeah, that was kind of our thing. I was actually going to be my friends and I that normally go. There's about 10 to 12 of us from the Lexington, Kentucky area that go up, since it's only a 3-hour drive, so very feasible. And then we all get rooms and all that fun stuff, and we hang out and we go hit a lot of fun games and hit the vendor hall, and we play a lot of Legends of the Five Rings RPG 4th edition, Heroes of Rokugan.
Nice.
We do a fun event on Wednesday night. We go to St. Elmo's, one of the great steakhouses down in downtown Indy, and we go there and we get a room reserved, and we drop a lot of money on steak and their famous shrimp cocktails and a lot of bourbon and all that stuff, and have a fun night. And we kind of had redone this year a little bit of what we could. And one of my friends actually has a place on the Western Kentucky and has a lake house, or his parents have a lake house, so we were going to go down. But I decided not to go just because I've been traveling again, and I actually ended up getting a sinus infection, and it's just no fun. So, but instead, we decided to record a podcast. So that's why you were talking about Let the Cards Fall, because this podcast is going to be specific to some of our favorite Star Wars games of all time. So really excited later on to talk about that with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that Derrick would have been doing a lot of Rokugan stuff for GenCon. Nathan, if we were doing GenCon today, what would you have been wanting to do?
Well, I absolutely would have wanted to play Star Wars Legion and play against players that I wouldn't normally play against. We've got a play group here in Charlotte. Unfortunately, we don't get to play as much as we'd like to, given the current circumstances. But it's still the same people several times over.
Right.
One of the great things about Gen Con is being able to go and meet people that you would never meet in regular life and share these games with and have a common frame of reference with them. So Star Wars Legion is one thing that I'd absolutely be looking for. And, I always enjoy it when we get to play Dungeons and Dragons together.
Yeah.
Because, normally one or the other of us is the dungeon master when we're playing D&D. It's great to, get somebody that we don't know as the dungeon master who has
Right.
their own style and their own stories that, we get to participate in together.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you never always get to play the characters together, as you said. So that's always fun. I do the same thing with L5R. I'm half the time DMing, so I always enjoy it when I just get to be the player.
Yeah, yeah. And if I had been at Gen Con today, I would have been taking my dad and my two sons around to scout out areas where we would feel comfortable enough so that on Saturday we could wear our family cosplay together. So the co-hosts know this, but for listeners, the plan was to have myself as Odin, my oldest son, Matthew, as Thor, my youngest son, Joseph, as Loki, and then my father was going to be Stan Lee, Marvel Comics creator, because he favors Stan slightly. They're not the same height, but my dad even grew out a mustache, you guys. He hasn't worn a mustache, I mean, ever. Like my entire adult life so far, he's not had facial hair.
Okay. Are you going to be able to see the family this weekend? Because you guys should still dress up and take a picture and post it.
So right now I've been trying to convince everybody that, we should just do it next year because I'm hoping against hope that Gen Con 2021 will happen. But yeah, I was floored when he said yes to being to coming to a convention of any kind and then to be in the cosplay group. The kids, my kids, his grandchildren were just over the moon. So it has been really hard for us to let that go for this summer, but I'm hoping we can pull it off next summer.
And we just need Dave Filoni to direct a Marvel film sometime between now and then.
Spectacular.
Then I can join in.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the good news about Gen Con, or Gen Can't, as we had taken to calling it here in 2020, is that the convention is still happening somewhat with virtual events. Now, Nathan and I talked a little bit about how we didn't want to spend real money on virtual events per se, but there are plenty of free events, and at least, like Fantasy Flight Games did do their in-flight report yesterday, as they normally would have done in person at Gen Con, although there were a few technical difficulties. But it's a wonderful thing to have the internet during this time. And speaking of finding geeky stuff on the internet, let's talk about how you guys can find out more about the Fandom Podcast Network. You can find us on the master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. You can, of course, look up FPNet on the Podbean app. And then all of the Fandom Podcast Network podcasts are available on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Podbean, Spotify, Google Play, and, of course, nowadays, internationally on iHeartRadio. You can find us on Facebook at the What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast Facebook group. We do still have email. I check that regularly. It's whatapieceofjunkpod@gmail.com. I run our Twitter for the show. On Twitter, it's at WhatWars, and you can find us on Instagram at the Fandom Podcast Network. Certainly, we want you to leave us some Apple Podcast reviews because that makes it easier for new fans to find us. Please just search Fandom Podcast Network and make sure you mention What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast, in your review. And Nathan, how do we feel about those 5-star reviews?
But we absolutely want to get those 5-star reviews. Not only do they help other people find our podcast, but we want to make sure that we don't upset the Wookiee.
Yes, because
we got to keep those Wookiee children fed.
We do. All right,
and all those human arms in their sockets.
and droid arms too.
And droids.
Yes. All right, Derrick, it's time for your favorite part of the show.
Woo! Yeah, my favorite part where we get to talk about what Star Wars shirts we're wearing this week. So, before we do that, we want to make sure folks know how they can support us besides just leaving reviews. Head on over to TeePublic and search on the TeePublic store for the Fandom Podcast Network. You can then search for What a Piece of Junk, and you can get all the cool apparel that they have with our logos on it. different colors. So, they've got T-shirts, they've got mugs, they've got masks, they've got beanies, hoodies, all sorts of cool stuff. They run promotions a lot of times too. So obviously, we appreciate any type of purchase that folks make. But, if you want to wait for sales, there's always anywhere from 10 to 25, 30% off sales from time to time. But head on over to the TeePublic store. So this week, I've got a T-shirt that I got from online again. So the previous one I talked about, I had the Chibi Mando with the baby, the child or baby Yoda, and he's chasing after a frog. This one's pretty generic. I'll let the guy see it first.
Oh, excellent. The child.
So it's just basically a black shirt, but then like where typically you would have your upper left pocket, it's got a little chibi baby Yoda child coming out of it, and he's waving. So it's just a cool, simple shirt. But that's what I've got on this week.
Talking doing the magic hand thing. That's excellent.
He does. So, and I have one more chibi shirt that I'll get to wear on the next one I'll talk about. So, but what shirt you got on this week, Nathan?
Well, I am wearing something that is definitely a Star Wars shirt, and no one can tell me any different because it's got a starfield on it, and absolutely no starships, no cloaked Klingon birds of prey whatsoever.
Or cloaked Sith infiltrators.
Yeah. There might be one of those. Just don't look too closely.
Just don't look too closely. Exactly.
Yeah. I might be falling down on the job here a little bit. This is, in fact, a Star Trek shirt. But if you don't look too close,
we won't tell anybody.
You might mistake it for Star Wars. So, Scott, what T-shirt are you wearing this week?
All right, so I'm kicking it old school. I guess I'm kicking it the new school version of old school because, like we said at the top of the show, this is our Star Wars gaming special. So, of course, Nathan, Derrick, and I can't talk about Star Wars gaming without mentioning Star Wars Destiny because, man, did we play the mess out of that game when it first showed up. We even ran a national league with Derrick in charge. And so my second best Star Wars Destiny deck ever was Poe Dameron and Maz Kanata, which was a big popular deck in Destiny right about set 3 of that game.
Before it got nerfed.
Before it got nerfed, yep. And this was, of course, several years ago now. And so it was during the time frame when people were really focused on The Force Awakens and the whole relaunch of Star Wars. And so at that time, before The Force Awakens actually was released, I bought this cool Poe Dameron X-Wing t-shirt that's blue in background and has X-Wing schematics for the T-70, the new generation of X-Wings, which was Black Leader's craft in The Force Awakens. And also at the very beginning of The Last Jedi, we had Black One doing stuff. And then, of course, there's also a schematic on this shirt of one of my favorite Star Wars characters of all time, BB-8, Poe Dameron's faithful astromech droid. So yeah, in honor of the fact that I'm going to talk about Poe Dameron in Destiny for a bit, I wore my original first ever Poe Dameron t-shirt.
Very cool. Question for you. So do you guys think that Poe's X-Wing, since it's the black one, and it's obviously very unique compared to the typical X-Wing gray, do you guys think that Poe's ship is probably the next to Luke's Red 5 or Luke's X-Wing in general? Do you think is probably the most popular X-Wing, or do you think Wedge or one of his X-Wings from Red 2 or Rogue Squadron you think is just as popular or more popular, or what do you guys think?
I would have to say yes. Poe Dameron's X-Wing is probably the second most popular one, largely because Wedge's X-Wing isn't that much different than, say, Jack Porkins' X-Wing. The pilot is the one that makes a difference there.
Yeah.
Wedge knew when to pull up. Jack didn't.
Indeed. Yeah.
We pour another one out for Porkins.
Indeed. I agree with Nathan. I think Poe's X-Wing is probably the second most famous X-Wing. For a certain generation of Star Wars fans, it might be more famous than Red 5. Luckily and happily, in The Rise of Skywalker, Red 5 actually got to have another moment of prominence, which was awesome.
Yeah, sitting at the bottom of the
water
ocean.
Yeah, and but I think if that had not happened in The Rise of Skywalker, Black One might be more famous, although on the other hand, Black One's not in The Rise of Skywalker since it was destroyed in The Last Jedi.
Yeah. I must say, though, Rey steals a lot of Luke's stuff.
Well, steals or inherits. I mean, they're the same family.
The guy was dead, and she keeps stealing it. She takes it for her own.
Didn't he give it to her? Like he
He
literally
was dead.
and then
She took it from Maz, his inherited lightsaber that she stole.
Now one could make the case that was Anakin's lightsaber, and Luke lost it carelessly.
Yes, but because of his father being dead, he would be the inherited. I mean, again, she takes Skywalker's name, but she's not truly his daughter.
Oh, okay, but Rey in The Force Awakens was just trying to return that lightsaber.
She did try to give it back to him.
Yeah, but then I guess she does return that. But then she feels she's since she returned that, she could take his X-wing. So
with regard to the X-wing, didn't he literally pick it up and basically give it to her? I mean, come on, that's how much more.
In one of the best moments of that movie, in my opinion.
Yeah. How much
you can
more?
only see
you played the
Hamill
music from Empire Strikes Back, so it brings a little joy to your heart.
Precisely. All right. Well,
I'll let it go. Ray can have the lightsaber and the X-wing.
Okay, we are getting ready to transition into some news. So let me wander over here to the bar here on Naboo and see what rumors and what kind of libations I can come up with.
Get some good pucks. I need some good information this week, Scott.
Hi, this is Delilah S. Dawson and her current cold virus, and you are listening to What a Piece of Junk podcast.
All right, I'm back. This week, Naboo being an outpost of refinery and civilization, here I was able to find a Starbucks. Yeah, I know, a Starbucks in Star Wars, but what are you going to do? And so for this week's episode, because we're going to be talking about gaming and I'm really jazzed about it all, I decided it was time to fire up the Nitro Cold Brew with salted cream, caramel, and vanilla bean powder. So later on in the podcast, I might be like really, really intense because I'll be jacked up on the most amount of caffeine that is allowed to be sold by law, according to the FDA.
Just real quick, though, if you would have been at GenCon, do you hit the Starbucks every day?
Oh, my God, dude. If they had Nitro Cold Brew on tap at GenCon, I would be in a lot of trouble because I don't like to sleep at GenCon anyway. And when I drink it, one of these, I'm geared. I would have probably had at least one, if not two, over the course of the first 2 days, because you know what I would have done? I would have gone to the dealer hall and we would have, as a family, we would have split up and gotten as many exclusives as we could, as early as we could. And then I'd probably rope the children and maybe Nathan into helping me build some brand new promo Legion and or Warhammer 40,000 models. Because Nathan, while I take a sip of this, tell the story about Monsterpocalypse 2.0.
Okay, so I can't even remember which year this was.
Probably 2 years ago.
It wasn't that long ago. Yeah, I think it was
17.
The year before last.
17. It was 17.
17.
3 years technically at this point, yeah.
It was GenCon 50.
So we used to play a game called Monsterpocalypse way back in the day. And Monsterpocalypse came with pre-painted miniatures. And that part was cool, but it was also a blind buy. When you bought a box, you didn't know which monsters you were getting. And the game itself was basically playing Godzilla, only they couldn't use the word Godzilla. So it was, non-trademark versions of monsters. And I really enjoyed that game for a lot of reasons. Getting knocked down buildings was one of them. And they finally came out with a second edition of that game. And the second edition of that game came with miniatures you had to assemble and paint. I had never painted a miniature before in my life, but I really wanted to play this game because we enjoyed the original so much. So we got the Monsterpocalypse starters at GenCon. That was the first time they were released. They weren't even released to the entire public at the time. It was the only place you could get them. We went ahead and got them, took them back to the hotel, and we painted them. Scott, myself, and his two boys painted every miniature overnight.
This was close to 60 different models total.
Yeah, I'm not sure what time we went to bed or if we went to bed, but we went to a tournament the very next day, and the vast majority of models that we saw at that tournament were just like blue stuff tacked together.
If they were even fully assembled. Some of them were just in pieces and just being pushed across the board.
Yeah, and we're sitting there playing with fully painted armies of models.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
It was amazing. The kids have never forgotten it. Derrick, you talked about St. Elmo's, the steakhouse there in Indianapolis. Have you ever been to the Ram Brewery when you were at
Oh, of
GenCon?
course. Yeah, we
so,
always try to make it because they always have their brew of the year.
Yes. So the brew of the year Monster Apocalypse 2.0 came out, was a reference to Monster Apocalypse. And there was a promo version of one of the monsters, the big Call of Cthulhu looking guy. And on his base, he had stepped on the Ram Brewery. He had crushed the building, and he had grabbed the giant water tower where they brew their beer, and he was drinking all the beer out of the water tower. And so I made sure to paint him as though he had the beer like running down his chin. It was so much fun. And essentially, we got a door prize for having such good-looking models. I still have it. It's an original piece of artwork from the design meetings for Defender X, one of the big robot guys. Anyway,
Scott has that, and I've got the Brugash right over here to my right. I keep him right next to my record player.
Yep. Always knocking back a cold one, a gigantic, like 17,000-gallon cold one.
Yeah, but that actually started my love of painting miniatures, which helped get me into Star Wars Legion. So it all circles back around.
Yeah, because prior to that, Nathan was like, I don't know if I want to try to paint all these things. But once I showed him, we went out in the parking lot of the hotel that year and spray painted models at like 11 o'clock at night. It was ridiculous. But also,
we were holding up phones to light up the model.
Yep. Well, anyway, while I was over at the bar getting the cold fusion coffee, the bartender there told me about some pretty cool Star Wars related rumors. But this first news item isn't a rumor, it's news. Derrick, The Mandalorian has been nominated for 20 Emmys. That's amazing.
Yes. 20 Emmys. Can you believe that, guys? They were nominated for Outstanding Drama Series. Obviously, quite a bit in the voiceover performances, guest actors in a drama series, production, cinematography, costumes, prosthetics, sound mixing and editing, special visual effects, all sorts of stuff, and obviously outstanding stunt coordination for a drama series. So, and then not just The Mandalorian, but also Star Wars Resistance was nominated for Outstanding Children's Program.
Outstanding. I am amazed that The Mandalorian got a drama series nod. I will be really shocked if they win that. It'll be great, but I'm glad that a Star Wars story of any kind has been given a drama nomination. It is quite rare for our favorite galaxy far, far away to get any of the quote-unquote serious awards. Of course, they win often for soundtrack, music, occasionally for writing, certainly for all of the special effects and amazing things that they do. But it's rare to get a drama nod or even get a nod for a performance by a certain actor. So Giancarlo Esposito was nominated for guest actor in a drama series for his work as Moff Gideon on The Mandalorian. And then Taika Waititi himself, as the voice of IG-11, was nominated for Outstanding Character Voiceover Performance. So great job to everyone involved. And I hope we bring home one of the Emmys that is for performance.
Yep. And definitely, like we talked about too, Ludwig got for best original dramatic score, so that's very cool.
Yeah, and it'd be great to see Star Wars history of award-winning music carry on over into the streaming world.
Yeah, unfortunately, John Williams can't live forever.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, moving on, more Hollywood-related rumors here. We did learn this week during a Comic-Con panel about the Amazon series The Boys that Karl Urban, who is in The Boys, did have a cameo in The Rise of Skywalker. Now, it's sort of Star Wars tradition, dating all the way back to the OG Star Wars, Episode 4, A New Hope, that fans tell each other that famous Hollywood actors are actually under the helmet for various stormtroopers or aliens in the cantina. I remember hearing tales of Sylvester Stallone or John Travolta, who were all big stars in the 1970s, that they were on set for Star Wars as stormtroopers. Now, a lot of that turned out to be urban legends, but in this case, Karl Urban did confirm that he played a stormtrooper in The Rise of Skywalker. Nathan, were you surprised / happy to learn that Urban is now the uber geek when it comes to franchises? For he has been in The Lord of the Rings, Star Trek, and now Star Wars.
Yeah, and we thought Simon Pegg was doing good, but Carl Urban's got him beat. Carl Urban is one of those actors that can just really disappear into a role. There have been times when, well, let's be honest, with just Lord of the Rings and Star Trek, when I saw him in Star Trek, I didn't realize at first this is the same guy who played Aomer.
Yep.
He's that good at just melding into his character and appearing as different characters. So I thought it was really cool that we've got kind of a tradition for the sequel trilogy that we have actors from Star Trek under the helmets in stormtrooper costumes.
You forgot, Scott. He's also in the MCU.
Oh yeah, he's Oh, help me out. Blood Axe? Is that his?
No, he's
in Ragnarok. Yeah. So.
But what's
he
his
was Skurge?
Scourge.
Yes.
Sorry.
With his
his
two guns,
MR-14s or whatever they were.
Yeah.
That he got in Texas.
Right. I keep mixing that character up with Blood X. My bad. It's the face
But
paint.
that's another one. I mean, if you just look at him there, and then look at that character, and then look at Bones from Star Trek, and then look at Aomer. If you didn't already know those three were the same guy, you wouldn't be able to tell just looking at them.
Absolutely not. And I know that listeners out there who haven't heard this yet are asking themselves, well, which stormtrooper is he? Well, he was kind enough to specify that his good friend, J.J. Abrams, let him be one of the stormtroopers who is standing aboard the Finalizer when the Knights of Ren and Kylo Ren walk down the hallway and they leave that trail of dirty footprints. And there's two stormtroopers and one of them says, the Knights of Ren, and the other one says, ghouls, because they think of them as dark, evil things. And so the Knights of Ren line comes from Carl Urban. So he is in the final cut of the film.
Very cool. Yeah, I agree. I think he's just a phenomenal actor and always appreciate everything. I still think they should make a continuation with the Judge Dredd sequel, or even a Amazon series or something at this point. Because
that'd be awesome.
Anything, and obviously I'm really excited for him with season 2 and The Boys.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, great to hear about Carl Urban being in The Rise of Skywalker. Another reason to love that movie for me. Now, this one falls squarely in the rumor category, but I hope that in the month of August, when we get it's probably some sort of virtual Star Wars celebration, that we will be confirmed that this is going to happen. Nathan, we've got the rumor here that Donald Glover will be reprising his role as Lando Calrissian in a Disney Plus series focusing on younger Lando's adventures. How do you feel about this rumor?
That would be awesome if it's true.
Right.
I'm not 100% sold that it is true. We've got a big movement for make Solo 2 happen, which I would love to see that happen. And this seems like a similar sort of deal because it's something that would arise out of Solo, and I'm not sure Disney really wants to go that direction. But if they do, I'm on board. I'd be watching this like the minute it drops.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, and it would be appointment television for me, just like The Mandalorian would be. And now the article that we're referencing here was from Screen Rant, so slightly more reputable source than some of your other online sources of Star Wars rumors. But
I have no idea which ones you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. There's no cosmic book news going on here. Anyway, so this article from Screen Rant talks about how they would like to see Glover, of course, playing the lead role, but somehow include Billy D. Williams. Maybe he does a voiceover to introduce each episode, or maybe he encapsulates episodes in a similar way to how Harrison Ford would occasionally encapsulate an episode of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles when it was on television in the 1990s. Ford was not in every episode of Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, but he often would sort of do a voiceover or a drop in, to be all, when I was this age in the 1930s or 1920s, so and so happened. And then we would cut to River Phoenix portraying young Indiana Jones. And so we could do a very similar thing here with Williams saying something at the beginning of each episode, and then cut to Donald Glover doing whatever it is that Lando was doing in that memory that Williams is recalling. We've already got a framing device that's canon, and that is, of course, the Calrissian Chronicles, because we see Donald Glover recording the Calrissian Chronicles on board the Millennium Falcon during part of Solo: A Star Wars Story. Derrick, we're just talking about how it would be great to have Billy D. Williams also involved in a Lando series on Disney Plus. How would you feel if that happened?
Obviously, we need more Billy D, plain and simple. I think most of us were pretty upset that it took them until The Rise of Skywalker to get Lando back. Obviously, every time he hit the stage, he just stole the show to me for Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
He's just got that presence. And again, not just the Lando Chronicles, but also, that's how really The Last Shot was, when they wrote the novel there, and how it was talking about the different time frames. So perfect. I think, you hit it right on that they could have, have him obviously do a little bit of filming, but, if Billy doesn't want to be too much on it, obviously it's easy enough to do recording, right? He doesn't even have to leave his house. They can do it over computer, phones, whatever. To get a voiceover, but definitely anything we can do to get them continuing the Solo story. Obviously, it'd be great to get Aldrin and who plays Chewie? Shoot,
Jonas Suotamo.
Jonas. Yes, thank you, Jonas. And obviously, if we get more Kira, who doesn't like Amelia? So anything we can do to get more out there. Whatever, and Donald does already a lot of great television on FX and some of the other cable shows and stuff like that. And I don't see why he wouldn't want to do something else for Disney Plus. Come on, it's Disney money.
And it would give us a way to find out what was Maul doing at the end of Solo.
It would, and I am eager to see that particular story thread continued. And frankly, I know this will be a little controversial to people, but I enjoyed the character of L337 in Solo. And if the Calrissian series happens, and it is a Calrissian Chronicles kind of thing, we might even get one of those weird non-chronological episode orders like we used to with the Clone Wars series. And you could have a couple of adventures where young Lando tells stories about stuff that he and L3 did before she got destroyed in Solo.
Yeah, well, the Calrissian Chronicles in Solo, there were 3 that he talked about, and they were all based off of novels that are now part of the non-canon expanded universe.
Right.
Only, apparently they did happen in some respect because they were mentioned in Solo. So we might get, television versions of those stories. And those might have L3 worked into them. I know she wasn't in the original novels, but she could be added easily enough.
Well, and there's still a chance that you could actually have almost kind of like a Kit from Knight Rider version of the Millennium Falcon, right? Where Donald Glover talks to L3 in the Millennium Falcon presently, right?
Yeah.
Or at least, when Lando's still young afterwards. So, and this could be all prior again to Han actually winning the Millennium Falcon, right? So it's all going to be technically past tense at this point and really just help develop that character. But then, there's no reason not to have this mega crossover, right? Let's pull the CW with Disney Plus series spinoffs. They're already doing it with the MCU. Why wouldn't you want to do this with Star Wars stuff? And they're just, it writes itself. Again, I don't understand why. Disney wants to keep all the Star Wars stuff to secret. Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, make it happen, guys. I mean, you guys just tell them to make it happen. They can get everybody else the proper people. Because again, Obi-Wan I'm excited for, but it's only going to be a 6 to 8 episode limited series, and it's over with.
Yeah.
Donald Glover and Aldrin and all them are young enough that you want to do it now before they all get into their 50s, 60s, and we've got freaking sequel stuff happening all over again because nobody did any, or Lucasfilm never did anything with the original characters.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Go ahead and cast these guys. They did great jobs on their characters. Let's strike while the iron is hot, as Derrick has pointed out. Okay, so I got one more tidbit of news. These are some sneak peeks. We were talking earlier about GenCon's doing some stuff online. Fantasy Flight Games, who makes all of the licensed Star Wars tabletop gaming out there right now, they had their Fantasy Flight in-flight report on Wednesday. This is the day before we recorded. And they have previewed 4 new units for a game that all 3 of us love, and that if you haven't played it as a Star Wars fan, you should check it out. It's called Star Wars Legion, and it is a tabletop miniatures war game set in the galaxy far, far away. Guys, we got to see 4 really important parts of the Clone Wars revealed as upcoming miniatures for Legion. We've got Separatist specialists, Republic specialists. Then we have 2 huge names. Darth Maul is coming to the game, and Anakin Skywalker, Jedi clone commander guy, is coming to the game. Nathan, can you contain your excitement for these things?
No.
If you guys can't tell, we see Nathan's surprise face right now, as it just says Nathan Miracle on his box because he doesn't have a video.
Yes, he's so shocked and so hype for these units that the camera could not contain his awesomeness.
No, I am super excited about all 4 of these. We did have some rumor and speculation that Anakin Skywalker and Darth Maul were going to show up. So I'm not terribly surprised that they were announced yesterday. This recording is happening on Friday, and FFG is supposed to have a Legion specific thing tomorrow, Saturday. Wait, hold on. Or is
2 days away. It's Thursday.
Sorry, coronavirus thing. Today's Thursday.
Today is Thursday, yeah.
2 days from now, on Saturday, they should have a Legion specific one. So we might find out more about what these models actually do at that point in time. That said, the Republic Specialist and the Separatist Specialist, we did not have rumors about. So I was surprised to see those come up at this point, and I'm really excited about them. The Rebel Specialist and Imperial Specialist are some of my favorite expansions for the Galactic Civil War era factions. So I'm excited to see these guys show up in the Clone Wars era. The specialist for the Separatist in particular, that means that they're going to get a tactical droid as a commander, which means that they have a low-cost, or will have a low-cost command option, which is something that they've been sorely missing. Right now, they only have Count Dooku and General Grievous, who are both really high cost. So that will help them get more models on the board. I was
especially for skirmish.
For skirmish, yes, but I was also calculating up with an 800-point game, which is the standard size. Assuming that the tactical droids are no more than 75 points, and I think they will be less, you could have upwards of 65 models on the board.
Wow.
Droids galore.
That's a pile of plastic for Star Wars.
And theoretically, you could just have them all be droids, too.
Yeah.
They would all be droids. This would be using the B1 battle droids with an extra trooper and a heavy weapon, the E5C blaster heavy weapon. That gives them 8 models. 6 copies of that is 48 models. 2 of the tactical droids would get you up to 50, and then you'd still have enough points to run 3 full squads of the BX commando droids with snipers.
Funny.
For 15 more models.
Derrick, I'm going to need more Tauntauns. Wow.
Yeah, gonna need a lot more than just a couple tauntauns on top of that.
Yeah.
But so folks know too, Scott and Nathan are going to record a special snippets episode upcoming because we've got some requests of folks asking a little bit more detail on Legion. Obviously, we like to talk about it. We've kind of scaled back a little bit, not talking about it on every recording. But again, I know folks want to know a little bit more about it. So I know Nathan and Scott do have a special episode that they're going to record where they're going to go in a little bit more detail, specifically for a snippets episode. So stay tuned more for that. But yeah, definitely cool stuff with the Fantasy Flight in-game report. They also have the X-Wing later today they're doing, and the Star Wars Armada game tomorrow prior to Saturday's reveal of more content for the kit reveal for the Legion models. So very cool.
Yeah. I just want to chime in real quick about the preview here for Anakin and Darth Maul and the droid separatist specialists. For Anakin, I love the fact that his subtitle is The Chosen One. That's just chef's kiss. Amazing. Also, he gets to use two of his lines for his command cards. One is, "This is where the fun begins." And another is, "You underestimate my power." So good times. Meanwhile, Darth Maul comes with 3 of his Sith probe droid things from the Phantom Menace. And his command cards include some of the stuff associated with him as lines. Of course, you have the Phantom Menace as one of his card titles. At last, so reference to his line from the film, "At last we will have our revenge." And then one of his command cards is titled Duel of the Fates. Oh, so good. And then lastly, thanks to the separatist specialists, we finally have a card in Legion that droids can play that is titled Roger, Roger.
Yes.
Very nice.
And I will point out, you mentioned the Sith probe droids. I thought those were going to be something that you could just attach to Darth Maul, but somebody on the FFG forums, looks like Lachlan is their handle name, zoomed in, and you can actually see that those are Special Forces rank. So they will actually be their own separate unit that you can field.
Yeah, so if you want to bring Darth Maul, but you don't care about doing whatever Sith probe droids do, you can leave them in the box, or vice versa.
Maybe, depending on what keywords they have. It might be required that you bring Maul in order to bring the probe droids.
That's true. It could be some kind of a counterpart or whatnot thing, like ID10 is with Iden Versio.
Well, no, ID10 is part of Iden Versio's setup, not a separate unit. It might be more like K2SO, who is a completely separate unit from Cassian, but you have to bring Cassian in order to bring K2SO.
Or it might be like the Mandalorian guys are with Sabine Wren, where you can do the retinue, and you don't have to bring them, but if you do bring them, you get a points discount if you also have Darth Maul, because it might be retinue Darth Maul.
Could be.
Could be more to come Saturday, though.
Yep. All right, excellent. Well, I think that just about wraps it up for our rumors and news tidbits. So before we jump into the meat and potatoes of this episode, where we talk about our top picks for the best Star Wars games of all time, let's check in with Kevin to hear what else we have on the offering here in the Fandom Podcast Network.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to our other awesome shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, our weekly pop culture podcast. Couch Potato Theater, our podcast celebrating our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a whole year in movies. The End Zone, our NFL podcast. Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast. The Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville podcast. Hair Metal, the 1980s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our Doctor Who podcast. Lethal Mullet, a 1980s action film podcast. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast. And our newest show, Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast. A deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. You can enjoy all of these great Fandom Podcast Network shows on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The FPNet can also be found on the Podbean app. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on Apple Podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, and now iHeartRadio. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can also email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
Hi, this is Eric Walker, the original Mace, the OM in the universe. Sorry, Sam Jackson. And you're listening to What a Piece of Junk podcast.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Kevin. You sound better than ever, man. So guys, this is the big one for us. We often express our fandoms, Star Wars and otherwise, through the games that we play. We are a slightly weird offshoot of a lot of the people that buy these collectible Star Wars and Star Trek items that we don't just collect them. We buy them with an eye toward competition. Whether that be video games, card games, model games, miniatures games, role-playing games, etc. So we decided that since we can't go to GenCon this year, we're going to do this episode where we each talk about our top picks, and specifically our top 7 picks for the best Star Wars games of all time. Now, we're not limiting ourselves to genre, so this is tabletop games, role-playing games, video games, etc., etc. Derrick, why don't you kick us off? What do you got, and why did you pick the things that you picked?
All right. So I really like what the guys over at Culture Clash do with their Hall of Fame series, and they kind of pick their top 7. They have some honorable mentions and stuff like that, and then the guys kind of talk a little bit about which ones they want to put in the Hall of Fame. I don't think we'll ever really be able to do that, just because I think with 3 of us here, we pick 2 and then we'd have a debate on 1, right? I just don't think that would work as well. But I thought it'd be really fun to talk about like you said, the top games that we think of all time for Star Wars. So let's just start from the bottom of my list here. So my first game that I think is kind of the best of all time is Star Wars The Old Republic MMORPG. So multi-masked player online role-playing game. It's a game that's based in the Old Republic, so 2,000-3,000 years prior to the original trilogy and what we're used to with all our characters. So Sith and Jedi are mass galore. They still have multiple alien races and all that. And then basically you pick a character, and it's a lot like your original MMORPG games like EverQuest or World of Warcraft or Dark Age of Camelot, those famous games back in the late 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, and even today. I mean, obviously World of Warcraft is still very popular worldwide. But it puts you in the Star Wars universe, right? And it was one of those games that I was just so stoked because I played a ton of EverQuest and a ton of World of Warcraft. And I was thinking, all right, this is going to be the next game. It was obviously put out by EA. And what BioWare did, they had the Mass Effect stuff. They're known for huge role-playing aspects, customizing your character, world events, all this stuff. And I just think this is definitely one of my top favorite games of all time. I just bring back a lot of memories. I played this game for about a solid, probably 2 years straight. Took a break, came back, played it a little bit more, and then, kind of dabbled my feet a little bit here and there on free to play, but definitely one of my favorite games of all time. And I know you guys play both of this as well.
We have 2 guilds on Star Wars The Old Republic. Nathan and I do on the servers there, 1 Republic and 1 Empire. We love that game. We go around and we love the customization of our characters and all the options that we have. We love the interactions you can have with famous locations in the Star Wars universe. You can visit Alderaan in Star Wars The Old Republic because this happens thousands of years before the planet was destroyed by the Galactic Empire. And you get a lot more.
You can have a house now.
You can build a castle or a house, a manor there on Alderaan. And you have a lot more storyline, even as a single player, for this game than you do for some other MMOs like World of Warcraft or EverQuest. Within the Star Wars The Old Republic universe, You have 8 different storylines to go through, some of various quality, some better stories than others, of course. But you've got 4 classes in the Imperial side and 4 classes in the Republic side. And I have a friend who works at BioWare in Austin who helps with this game. Shout out to Manjani Oso and his team over there at BioWare and EA. The game's still running strong today. And just this month, Star Wars The Old Republic was launched on Steam, the virtual game store that most people who do PC and sometimes MacBook or Apple gaming, they use Steam to keep track of their game collection and to make sure everything runs properly. And you can now get Star Wars The Old Republic via Steam. Nathan, I know you're not as into Star Wars The Old Republic as I am, but you did enjoy it at least enough to play some with us.
I did, and I do have a MMORPG on my top 7 list, but it's not actually Star Wars The Old Republic.
Which one is it?
Game. It is Star Wars Galaxies.
An excellent game.
An excellent game that came out in 2002. There was an open beta in 2001, and I particularly enjoyed its pre-combat upgrade. The reason I like the pre-combat upgrade is it had a much different leveling mechanic than most MMORPGs do. You gained experience in certain things, not overall experience. For example, if you were a marksman and you used a certain type of weapon, you would gain experience with that type of weapon. And you could specialize in, I use pistols, or I use carbines, or I use rifles. Or you could switch out and do all 3 of those and become a master marksman. And there were several different options that you could take, and you could kind of build your own class. You didn't have one particular route that you had to go once you picked what you were going to do. So I really enjoyed that aspect of that game, and for that reason, I like it a little bit better than Star Wars The Old Republic. They're both great games. I enjoy playing both of them. I just like Galaxies a little bit better.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense because it is certainly the groundbreaking idea of an MMO in the Star Wars universe. And also, let's be honest, Galaxies was made at a time before there had been some of the changes to the Star Wars canon that we have seen recently. Galaxies in 2002, Galaxies was made before the Revenge of the Sith was a film. I mean,
Yep. And for that reason, it was set between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, when we knew a lot of what was going on and a lot of the major characters were still around. They didn't set it between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi because they wanted to make sure that Han Solo could be in the game somewhere. And he was. I actually got to meet him in game a couple of times. He was in a couple of different places. And if you looked at it too closely and had friends who were in certain places while you were in other places, he might be in 2 places at once. But as long as you just played just by yourself, you'd never notice that.
But yeah, it definitely, unfortunately, like most MMOs of the 90s and 2000s, it lasted a few years and then unfortunately just kind of shut down right after monthly subscriptions run out. And, a lot of fans still played it. Diehards, I know they still have a lot of those. What's the word I'm missing here? They have the
servers.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what they call it. They're, like you said, the servers that people run on their own. It's not actually run by the company.
They're called private servers.
Well, private servers, yeah. But there's another term I can't think of. But anyways, yeah, they still have those out there. I know they're displaying it to this day still.
Another term they get referred to as is Star Wars Galaxy emulators.
Emulators, there we go. Emulated. Yep, that's what I was looking for. So yes, but yeah, definitely a game I never got into just because I was so big into EverQuest and then World of Warcraft that I just never got into it, surprisingly.
It always amazed
a lot of good stuff.
Galaxies, of course, was made by Sony, so Sony Online Entertainment, and they also are the EverQuest crew. I was amazed back in the day that they didn't do a cross promotion, or if they did, any fans out there might be throwing popcorn at their podcast. My apologies if I have forgotten that there was a crossover promotion, but I would have loved to have seen some sort of EverQuest deal where if you were in EverQuest, you could do XYZ to get like a promo thing to go play Star Wars Galaxies, or vice versa. Like you could have, it would have been so epic if you could have found a lightsaber hilt in EverQuest as an ancient artifact, right? And then that unlocked a code for you to go get a demo of Star Wars Galaxies, in which you started with.
Well, this is why Sony Online doesn't exist anymore.
Now wait a minute. EverQuest 2 is around, right?
I mean, they still have EverQuest.
No,
I mean, EverQuest still is coming out with expansions nowadays. I don't know, like their 21st or 22nd. So,
wow.
But yeah, I mean, but they've been rebought and renamed numerous times. It's not Sony anymore.
I got you. Okay, yeah. Well, then maybe you're right. They should have just called me back in the day, and I would have been like, "Well, here's what you do."
I mean, come on, merchandising.
Merchandising.
But
you mentioned lightsaber hilts, and that brings up a point about Star Wars Galaxies that I particularly liked, but I think a lot of people didn't. You couldn't just start as a Jedi.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You had to unlock the ability to be a Jedi, and then once you unlocked that ability, you were
bonkers
something
broken
called permadeath, where if you died a certain number of times as a Jedi, you could only log in as a Force ghost.
Wow.
So it was
wow.
really
Talk
limited.
about canon and very faithful to the source material. That's that's pretty awesome.
On the one hand, it was awesome because this is what happened. The Jedi were being hunted down and exterminated, and if you popped up as a Jedi, bounty hunters could actually take contracts out on you. Other player characters could come track you down and kill you for the Empire, which is very faithful to what was going on in Star Wars at that time.
Yep.
A lot of people want to play Jedi.
Yeah, for sure. You don't necessarily buy the game to be a Star Wars simulator. You buy it to do cool stuff and have fun.
Yes.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
but
so
speaking of
the game.
BioWare and EA, another game that they came out with that was originally what the Old Republic was based off was their console and PC game of Knights of the Old Republic, and obviously you could count Knights of the Old Republic 2, but that was the next one on my list just because back in the 90s, man, that was the jam for whether just being a Jedi or being a mercenary or scoundrel, and just being able to create your own character prior to the whole MMO leaps and bounds online stuff. But just Knights of the Old Republic was a game that to many shocked the world. Obviously introduced Revan, which is still one of the most beloved non-canon characters of all time.
Yeah, totally. And I also love Knights of the Old Republic. I did not play Knights of the Old Republic 2 as much as I played the first one. But when I first saw it, I thought, okay, well, it's one of these turn-based type, RPGs on a console. I was a little bit of an RPG snob at the time, and as always, a Star Wars snob. And so I was concerned that BioWare, as Derek pointed out, this is before Star Wars The Old Republic MMO. So I was concerned that BioWare was just going to try to churn out something real quick as a Star Wars tie-in and make a few bucks, right? But then I took a look at the game under the hood, if you will, and realized there's a reason people are going to love this game, and people still talk about it to this day. And that reason is the creators were wise enough to understand don't reinvent the hyperdrive when it comes to making a great role-playing game. What did they do? Why, Nathan, they lifted the rules and slightly modified them from Dungeons and Dragons, the mother of all RPGs. The Knights of the Old Republic essentially is a modified, Star Wars-ified version of the rule set for the D20 tabletop role-playing game of 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons. This is perhaps one of the most ambitious and therefore successful uses of what Wizards of the Coast publisher of Dungeons and Dragons, called at their time the Open Gaming License, which meant that anybody could take the base rules of Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition and then use them for free and then make their own little modifications. This is why so many people out there still play 3rd edition or 3.5 edition of Dungeons and Dragons. And we could talk about Pathfinder, but I won't get into all that today. Nathan, have you played Knights of the Old Republic, and did you know it was a D&D, modification?
I had no idea that was a D&D modification, and that probably ties back to the fact that I have never actually played it.
Okay, all right. Well, having just learned that it's 3.0, but for Star Wars, are you going to go get it for your iPhone and give it a shot?
I might just do that.
Yeah, baby.
That makes me far more interested in it than I ever was before.
Yeah, you essentially earn feats, and the computer rolls the dice in the background when you make attacks and what have you.
Well, on top of that too, it was really the first true game that I think that gave you an option of what path you wanted to choose. I mean, there's always RPGs out there, but this game really took it to the next level of you wanted to go true dark side, you wanted to stay on the light side, or did you want to muddle somewhere in the middle?
And Nathan, that is a adaptation of Alignment, as you might have guessed.
Yes, yeah, good, evil, lawful, chaotic.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah, Knights of the Old Republic, excellent one. Not on my list, but obviously not for a reason. Not to say I dislike it, Derek, but yeah. I feel that SWTOR took that engine, took that idea and built it out so much more. So SWTOR, Star Wars: The Old Republic MMO, did make a spot on my list, whereas the predecessors not necessarily so. But I would certainly put them as honorable mentions.
Yep. So,
well,
what's the next one on your list, Scott?
Yeah, not on Nathan's list because he's never played it. But hey, that might change later today, or at the very least this weekend. All right, so next on my list would be, let's see, we already talked about SWTOR. I'm going to go with my number 6 choice, which is Star Wars Destiny, the card and dice game that we all fell in love with at GenCon in 15, right, guys? 15 is where we first saw it. Is that right?
I thought it was 16.
Or 16? Okay, I might miss it by 1 year. But yeah, so Destiny. No, I know what I'm thinking of. At Gen Con in 15, I played a co-op Star Wars card game, a la the Lord of the Rings adventure card game from Fantasy Flight Games, where the self-controlling deck was Darth Vader and the Empire, and the players all played as one of the major heroes of the rebellion. I mean, it was almost exactly like the Lord of the Rings adventure card game. But they got a lot of feedback in 15 at the Fantasy Flight Games booth saying, this was fun, but people who play Star Wars card games have been conditioned by the mother of all card games, which we will definitely talk about later, to want a competitive player versus player heads up type of Star Wars card game. So
let's be able to play the villain.
Yes.
Yeah, and
people,
be Darth Vader.
People want to play as Darth Vader. And boy, did they in Star Wars Destiny dice duel system game. I am still friends on Facebook with one of the creators of this game and rule system, Lucas Litzinger, who now works for Wizards of the Coast, but previously worked for Fantasy Flight Games. The idea here, folks, was you had cards, you had a deck of cards like you do for a lot of customizable or trading card games, but you also had multicolored computer printed customized dice that would go assigned to certain specific cards in the game, some of which began the game in play. These were your main characters, and then some of which were brought into play when you played the card associated with the die. And during your turn, you took actions back and forth with your opponent. Well, you know, in proper matches where the game wasn't terribly broken, you took turns going back and forth. You would roll the dice, and depending on which faces came up, they gave your characters new abilities to do when it was your turn to take another action, such as firing their blaster pistols, or swinging their lightsabers, or going and getting credits, or stealing credits or destroying credits on the opponent's side of the table, or doing special force powers, or any number of cool things, depending upon how the dice fell. And then also built into the game were a variety of ways to re-roll or remove your opponent's dice from the active section of the table. Then at the end of each turn, you kind of reset everything, and next round you get a chance to roll more dice back into the active pool, and you see what options the Force gives you. You could play as heroes, which would of course be basically folks from the light side of the various Star Wars sagas, or you could play as villains, which would be folks from the dark side of the various Star Wars stories. Guys, I loved it. My kids loved it. We played it at numerous conventions. We had a national league that Derrick was in charge of. I ran 2 different store leagues here in the Charlotte area simultaneously. At certain points, I attended tournaments for Star Wars Destiny in person that had upwards of 50 players. And then one year at MomoCon in Atlanta, Georgia, I used a Tarkin Dr. Aphra deck to win second place and a variety of awesome promos as I went 5-1.
Didn't the Gen Con we attend, though, did that have over like 100 some players?
It probably did.
Not the one I played in.
Because that was the one that you brought your sons to, the first one, I thought there, Scott, and we all played Destiny, and I ended up having to play Joseph.
Oh, you know what? Yes, it did.
Yes, that was in 17.
Yeah, and like I said, that was I think like almost 150. That was at the peak, because that was just like the 3rd expansion to come out.
That was the Gen Con in which I played Poe Dameron and Maz Kanata, and
yeah,
I made some play errors and didn't do as well as I probably could have.
Is that the one that I was playing Seventh Sister and Boba Fett, I believe?
No,
Boba Fett wasn't around yet.
Later.
Yeah, there was only
Okay.
the first 2 or 3 expansions, I think, came out that year. The
Nathan,
first year,
This
second year though, that had everything.
Nathan, the tournament that Derrick and I are talking about is the same year that we did the Kiku Batsuri for Legend of the Five Rings LCG, and we.
Oh, well, there's only 2 things I remember about that Gen Con. Spending the entire day playing that tournament for
Mhm.
Legend of the Five Rings, and accidentally ordering a bean burger later
Yes,
that night
we played
because I
later
was
that night at
so-
the restaurant.
so
Yes.
tired.
That tournament, yes, the Legend of the Five Rings inaugural tournament for
Yes.
the living card game did take us an actual.
And I bought your promo off you.
You did, yes.
Yes,
It
yeah.
took us the actual literal 12 hours to play that tournament. It
Good grief.
was insane. But there were north of 700 people at the start of that.
And it
event,
was only 5 rounds.
and it was only 5 rounds.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I mean, it took like an hour to set up between rounds
Yeah. Yeah.
just because it was that many people. It was absolutely insane. I do remember another tournament for Destiny at Gen Con where I was playing Boba Fett and Seventh Sister.
Yeah, that was the following year.
Yeah,
That was 18,
and,
18, Nathan, 18.
and I actually made the cut to the second day in that tournament.
And so did I, but on the second day, I did terribly. Or was it the other way around? I didn't. I got right
No,
next to the
that-
cut, right?
You did not make the cut.
Yeah.
I was the only one from our group to make that cut. And I was hanging around getting ready for the second day. And I heard somebody talking, and he had gone like undefeated. And I had accidentally messed up. There was a certain trigger that I could do. It was rolling in the extra die with the Seventh Sister, the extra Seeker die.
The little droid die.
Yeah, the droid die that comes with her. I had forgotten to do it the entirety of the second round, and I lost that game. And I heard this guy talking about, in the second round, I was playing this guy, and I chose to think that he was just purposely not rolling in the Seeker die. I'm like, oh yeah, that was me. He's like, oh well, I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to insult you. I'm like, I don't feel too insulted. I won the rest of my games that day.
Yeah.
So I'm here for the same second day you are.
Yeah. I almost made it to day 2 that year with my Tarkin Afra deck, but I had played a member of Team France at the beginning of the day, and at the end of the day, as I was needing one more win to make the cut for day 2, I played another member of Team France, and I swear to you, the two guys were the guy I had played earlier was standing around and occasionally speaking French to his countrymen, and I didn't know what they were saying, but I feel like they may have been exchanging a little bit of a, hey, I think he's about to do this, like he did in our match, because I beat the first guy on Team France, but I lost to the second guy, and they were playing the same deck. But such is the way of things.
Yeah, because if I recall correctly, you started off like 4-0.
Yeah.
And you needed to be 5-2 on the day to get to the second day.
Yep. I won the first 4 and lost the back 3 and didn't make
Yeah,
it.
and I lost 2 of my first 3, but then 1 out. So the whole day we were thinking that you were going to make it to the second day, but then I ended up actually making it.
Which all worked out for the best, because on day 2 of Destiny, I actually wanted to play Legend of the Five Rings, and Nathan didn't care for it. So I got to go play L5R, and he got to go play Destiny, and we were both happy.
There you go.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
and it's a shame that the game didn't last long. Unfortunately, I mean, we all 3 of us have some Fantasy Flight games on here, but they're a great company for coming up with games, but they're a terrible company for supporting their games, especially in a competitive level. And
Yes,
Destiny, unfortunately, is already. I mean, it's 4 years and done.
Yeah, it's already canceled. Yep.
They couldn't keep up with producing the dice overseas, and they just, again, making poor business decisions and logistics decisions over the years, and then obviously they were bought out by Asmodee and blah 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 blah. But just overall, a great game, a great concept. They could have done a lot with it. I did like where they were kind of going. This last set that they came out with, Covert Missions, where they introduced a lot more plots that allowed you to win the game other than just net decking your opponent, or not net decking, but deck removal, or your killing off your opponent's characters, where they actually allowed multiple ways of like destroying the Death Star, or unfreezing or capturing your opponent's characters or stuff like that. So really cool ways of what they were doing. It's just a shame that they couldn't go further with the game. I definitely put that into my honorable mentions, because I definitely enjoyed the game. I just think it was too short-lived for me to say it was one of my top favorite games. Plus, I also have another CCG on here that I think, well, you both have it on here too as your top. So overall, just kind of picked a different category as best as I could for each game.
Yeah, I have this.
So Nathan, let's pick one from your list. Yeah. So next, outside of Galaxies and Destiny, what's one of your next games you have on your top 7?
All right. Well, one of the next games I have on my top 7 is the Shadows of the Empire game for the Nintendo 64. Part of the reason that I never played Knights of the Old Republic is because I never got that much into computer gaming aside from MMORPGs. I played a lot of Nintendo as a kid. I was a Mario fanboy, loved Legend of Zelda. So when Star Wars came to Nintendo, well, that was just perfect for me. So Shadows of the Empire was a third-person shooter game where you controlled Dash Rendar, who was basically a knockoff Han Solo, I admit it, but it was fun. And it took place between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. It was kind of a big push at that time that Lucasfilm had, that everything was Shadows of the Empire related. Prince Xizor, the Faline Prince of the Black Sun, was introduced there. And this video game was part of that. So you got to platform and shoot your way through several stages, fighting iconic characters like IG-88 and Boba Fett. And there were some stages where you got to take control of the Outrider, which was a YT-2400 freighter, somewhat similar to the Millennium Falcon, not quite exactly identical, but close enough that you could tell it was inspired by the Falcon. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, the iconic characters, blasters. I'm starting to realize that I like playing as things other than Jedi here.
Yeah. Partly because I agree with you completely that Shadows of the Empire was a great Star Wars game. Excuse me. Also, it was a huge event in Star Wars fandom at that time, because we hadn't had any new movies for a while. The only new Star Wars content that we got were things like novels and comic books, which are great, but they don't have the same punch as a live action film or movie or even a cartoon, right? So Star Wars, as per usual, kind of broke new ground in the entertainment venue by having a video game be the center point of a new canon Star Wars story, and then expanded upon it just as they would have any motion picture. And merchandising. It basically, Shadows of the Empire was a Star Wars event with everything but the movie. We had an original soundtrack. We had action figures. We had puzzles. We had
comic books.
We had comic books. We had graphic novels. We had actual paperback novels. And, of course, the creme de la creme was the video game itself. And, oh, man, at the time, it was one of the most groundbreaking video games that had come out. And it was a ton of fun. I played it so much in college that my roommates began to come up with lyrics to the various soundtracks because they kept hearing that music as I bulldogged my way through level after level, such that I can still hear Travis Kesterson going, Dash Rendar, Dash Rendar. He's not Han, he's Dash.
That's original score right there, guys.
Yep.
He's the next Ludwig.
He is indeed, yes. I'm going to call Travis up and tell him he needs to copyright those lyrics. Sadly, Dash Rendar and many of the other parts of Shadows of the Empire that were a little more, shall we say, focused on the adolescent teenage boy who was the current age of original series Star Wars fans at that time. Those items from the universe have been deemed non-canon.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most exciting times being a Star Wars fan in the 90s because it was an event. There was nothing up to this point that we were even noticing that we were going to get a episode 1, right? Mm-hmm. So this comes out. I remember, you got toys, the comics. I remember purchasing those comics each month just so I could read the next part of the story as it was coming out because it was just something so cool. And then again, we wanted a movie from this, right? I mean, I don't care. I think they should still do it. But definitely just one of those fun games too. I remember playing it on the N64 and just enjoying it.
I got to correct myself. My college roommate at that year was Travis Kearns, not Travis Kesterson. Whole different guy, but both Travis K. If perchance either of them listen to this, my apologies for mixing you guys up. But yes, Travis Kearns is the guy who busted out the Dash Rendar lyrics while he watched me fight the Dianoga in Shadows of the Empire.
Oh, yes. The one-eyed tentacle beast.
Yep.
Did you ever, while playing this game, create a file with the name _credits?
No, I did not, because when I played that game, it was on console, and I don't think I ever thought about trying to type in different saved game names that were, wacky.
If you did, and I think I learned about this particular thing from a issue of Nintendo Power.
I was just going to say Nintendo Power.
I had the power at that time, man.
Every kid in the 90s did.
Yeah, if you
paid $20 for a strategy guide.
Yes,
yeah, pretty much
from Brady Games.
If you put in _credits as your file name, then you get these weird things at the bottom of the screen during the regular credits, and it would talk about all these things that I didn't get at the time. One of them was about a wampa that was pining for the fjords. They were all Monty Python and Pinky and the Brain jokes.
Nice.
That's amazing.
Scott's gonna have to break out his console now.
Or at the very least, MAME, multiple arcade machine emulator here on my PC, or Boxer over here on my Mac. I could then emulate the N64. Anyway, sorry, I'm geeking out way too hard.
Well,
good
go
times.
do that. Go put in _credits as your file save name and watch the jokes fly.
Oh, that's amazing. I never knew about that. An Easter egg from
That,
Shadows
or
of the
you could
Empire.
probably just YouTube it, and it probably has it somewhere.
Yeah, definitely.
Probably so.
So you don't have to spend hours trying to replay the game and beat it and get pissed off because you can't now.
I won't.
20 years later.
Spend hours getting to play the game.
Yes.
Yeah.
I won't be able to beat it because I won't have Travis behind me singing my theme song.
Oh.
We just have to call him up.
I will. We're friends on Facebook. I'm going to have to tag him when we post this episode. So he can be like, I can't believe you remembered that song. Anyway, yeah, Derek, what's next on your list?
Well, since Nathan kind of brought up third-person shooter, I'm going to talk about first-person shooter. So everybody in the 90s definitely remembers some of the most popular games, right? Like Doom, Wolfenstein 3D, Quake series, all those fun games that we used to play in high school and college back in the 90s. The big one at the time, and this was before Knights of the Old Republic, this is really the first time, obviously prior to anything you have now with Battlefront and Battlefront 2 of Star Wars, you had Star Wars Dark Forces, where you actually got to play first-person shooter of Star Wars. You got to wield the lightsaber, which was one of the first games to actually kind of do it in that first-person point of view, and just wreak havoc on stormtroopers, and eventually get to fight Darth Vader. But yeah, I remember playing this game, and as an early kid in the early 90s, it was really hard playing it on hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just remember trying to run through the halls of the Star Destroyer and Death Star and try to, beat the stuff of the Dark Forces game. But that definitely, again, holds a special place in my heart, like all these games do. But just, again, I think, again, a leader and innovator of its time that led to all the great games that we have now of Star Wars, or a lot of other games too.
Yeah, I also found this game to be quite difficult when I played it back in college over on the PC. I was one of the few guys in our dorm room that had a PC capable of running this at full awesome graphics. Because back in the day, my geek friends and I would run our towers with the case off so that it would not overheat.
It was 184 megabytes. Woo!
Woohoo! Yeah, cranking up that overclocking that 486. This is before Pentiums were a thing, I believe.
Oh yeah.
And so. Yeah, we would all run our towers with the case off and fans blowing at it, to keep it from overheating once we discovered how to overclock. Dark Forces, a great game. You played Kyle Katarn, who turned out to be, I guess, spoiler alert, a burgeoning Jedi. He had a little bit of a Force awareness at the beginning of the game, but by the time we got to the sequel, Dark Forces 2, Jedi Academy, he was basically helping to train a new group of Jedi, wielding that lightsaber that Derek was talking about. But the penultimate mission, or maybe it was the ultimate mission, in the original Dark Forces, you worked your way up into the good graces of the galactic, rebellion, because at first you're just a mercenary, right? And you take on a few odd jobs here and there for the rebellion, and you do a good job of helping steal plans for basically a cybernetic and or robotic stormtrooper called the Dark Trooper. And once you help the rebellion in that way, they trust you with more and more important secret missions. And turns out, back in the old EU, Kyle Katarn was the dude that stole the plans for the Death Star and got them to Princess Leia. Obviously, this is no longer canon because otherwise we wouldn't have the excellent Rogue One. But at the time, it was a cool way to fill in that hole of, well, who exactly stole those Death Star plans that were mentioned in the opening crawl of the original Star Wars A New Hope? And the answer used to be Kyle Katarn. Today, the answer is, of course, Jyn Erso and Cassian Andor. Nathan, did you play Dark Forces? I know you're not always big on first-person shooter games.
Oh. Never did play Dark Forces either.
Okay, all right.
So you guys got some games on here that I'm not familiar with.
This one I cannot recommend to you as highly as Knights of the Old Republic, because once again, no Dungeons and Dragons tie-in. Womp womp.
Yeah,
but it's a fun game.
The D&D tie-in's gonna help there.
Yeah, but it is a fun game, and like I said, Kyle Katarn was a great Star Wars character during the dark times before we had more Star Wars movies. So Dark Forces, of course, being pre The Phantom Menace as well.
Yes, this was all early 90s. So
yeah. Nathan, what you got up next?
All right, next up, I have Lego Star Wars: The Complete Saga.
Beautiful game.
This is another video game. I enjoy a lot of the Lego games. Basically, you get to play as a couple of different characters at once, or you can play with a friend who can control one character while you control another. And the thing I like about the Complete Saga is it has all 6 movies.
Yeah.
Because when it came out, that's how many there were.
That's right. Yep.
Apparently, they didn't get the merchandising for the sequels.
Yeah. Well, at the time, there were no sequels, right?
But yeah, at the time there were no sequels. My understanding is that there is now or soon will be one that has the sequel trilogy as well. But I have not gotten to play that one, so I'm sticking with the Complete Saga as my representative of the Lego Star Wars series. And it's just a whole lot of fun. It recreates the movies, not super accurately because everything is Lego-fied, but you get to build different Lego scenes, and in the end, it's a whole lot cheaper than buying all of those separate things as Legos. So
Yes.
that's a plus.
Yes.
Yeah. $1,000 for the Millennium Falcon Special Edition.
Yeah, and then who knows how much for that crazy Star Destroyer.
I don't even want to think about that.
So one of the coolest things about Lego Star Wars as a series, not necessarily just the Complete Saga, although that is a really great game. Lego Star Wars as a game series was so well received, and fans love it so much that it gave way to Lego Star Wars animated stories, where they tell lots and lots of them. There was even a series called Lego Star Wars The Freemaker Chronicles, which has a whole different group of rebels out there fighting against the Empire.
Dengar's Australian.
Yes, he is. And then there was, of course, a Yoda Lego Star Wars movie with the Yoda minifig as the main character. There were various crossovers, Lego stories. Like Nathan said, not exactly keeping things strictly canon or strictly in line with what happened in the movies, but a lot of fun anyway. So yeah, Lego Star Wars is a big part of Star Wars gaming, and really impacted the whole fandom on a high level.
Yeah, I never really got much into them. I did enjoy the cartoons or animated series. Just something new to watch since we kind of had a break in between Rebels and all the Clone Wars stuff that came out. So and that's obviously on Disney Plus. You can watch it, but I never really got to play the video games too much, just because I felt like you had to buy the first one, then you had to buy the second one, then you had to buy the third one. Then they had a complete series of the original trilogy. Then you had to buy the first, or episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, and then the whole 3 of those, and then the complete saga. And it was like, okay, are they all the same, or are they just shorter versions, or what?
So the Complete Saga was, in fact, a collection of the older games, but with some bridging stuff built in. You had like these hubs you could go on different missions from.
Yeah, personally, I just waited till the Complete Saga because I saw where it was going. I said, yeah, I'm not going to buy each of the individual ones. I'll just wait till they all come
$50 a
out
pop.
together.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, so Mita and I played the heck out of some Star Wars Lego. We got 100% completion on several of the games. What we did, though, to avoid the problem that Nathan and Derrick are talking about was, this is seriously how long ago this was, we rented the games from places like Redbox or not Blockbuster, but guys, what was the name of that game rental place? Game Fury? No, that's not right.
GameFly?
I always went to Blockbuster myself. So.
Blockbuster, GameStop. You have Family Video.
Yeah,
Blockbuster was the only one I really know of that was a major one besides Family Video as a rental.
I'll have to look it up while we talk about something else. I remember this store had a design motif of purple and orange colors. Anyway,
Game Zone?
Might be Game Zone. Anyway, Mita and I would rent this, and like when we were dating, we would have Star Wars Lego dates. And she would come to my house, or I would haul the stuff up to her house, and we would have dinner. They would go home and play Star Wars Lego. And I mean, I knew.
If that's not love, folks, I don't know what is.
Right. I knew she was the one, probably on our 3rd or 4th date. But by the time we got to doing that stuff, I was like, oh my God, I want to marry her right now. And I want to wait until we had the wedding planned. But anyway, it was amazing stuff, and excellent choice to put on your list there, Nathan.
Derrick, what is the next one on your list?
So you guys mentioned a little bit earlier. I know Scott's got something that you can only really, truly appreciate. I'm assuming this is the actual one you get on arcade, but not actually the one that's on the computer screen. But his might be when he talks about it. But we've talked about it, joked about it a few times here before. The actual Star Wars Trilogy arcade game. The one where you get to sit down and you get to play the three main, I guess you would say, ship battles type deal, where you got the Death Star trench run from A New Hope. You had the Battle of Hoth for Empire Strikes Back, and then you had the speeder bike on Endor for Return of the Jedi, and then you got to do special missions of the Death Star 2, and as well as then fighting Boba Fett and then Darth Vader with your lightsaber.
Yeah. When I worked at an arcade, yes, my summer job during college summers and the last summer of high school was working at a video game arcade called Frankie's Fun Park in Columbia, South Carolina. Feel free to be jealous, because this was the halcyon days of premium arcade games like Mortal Kombat 3, Killer Instinct 2, Street Fighter Alpha, Darkstalkers, and then, of course, Star Wars Trilogy Arcade from Sega. And we had the big machine at our arcade that had to sit down with the joystick right in front of you. So when you were flying your speeder bike on Endor, or when you were flying your X-Wing, or when you were swinging your lightsaber, we had surround sound, big LCD screen. It was beautiful. We charged, I want to say, $3 a play, and people lined up. We made money hand over fist. And back in those days, I'm talking, I got some forearms from carrying buckets of quarters at the end of every shift, baby. So it was good times. And this was a premium example of what it was like to work at an arcade when Star Wars video games just ruled the day. And I mean, this was something else. If you've never played this game, I urge you to go find a retro arcade somewhere. Here in Charlotte, you can go to a Bari, and they often have this game rocking and rolling. If you live closer to South Carolina or in South Carolina, you can find this game at a retro arcade in Rock Hill. And if you've never played it, you got to go play it. If you played Star Wars Battle Pod at Dave and Buster's over the past decade, you got a little bit of a taste of what Star Wars Trilogy Arcade from Sega was like. But I would submit that Star Wars Trilogy Arcade is more fun even than the Star Wars Battle Pod. And that's not a bad video game.
Yeah, it was, again, a leader of its time, right? Just one of those things where it just brought you feeling like you were flying an X-Wing or flying a land speeder or doing a speeder bike. And it was just so cool to be able, as a kid back in the early 90s, to be able to play that. And I just remember, even at the movie theaters, they would have them, because some movie theaters, back in the day used to have arcades, games there. And I would just drop dollars and dollars before and after.
Yeah. Nathan, did you ever get to play this arcade game?
I did not. When I was a little kid, I lived in Shreveport, Louisiana, and there was a mall called Mall St. Vincent, and it had an arcade there. But we moved away from there in 1989, and I believe that is the last time I've actually been in an arcade.
Well, when the pandemic is over, I'm kidnapping you and taking you to a Bari, and hopefully they have this game still functioning, and you can try it.
Well, there's only one problem with that. It's not kidnapping if I go willingly.
Indubitably. Good times.
He just has lots of candy in his van. That's all.
Yeah. Excellent stuff.
But what game do you have next on your list, Scott?
So next up for me is one we've talked a little bit about already today on the show. It's Star Wars Legion. It's my number 4 game. So I won't jump too much more into Legion. Tabletop Star Wars miniatures battle game. Really great war game. Customized dice. Interpretations of classic and iconic Star Wars weapons like lightsabers and E11 blaster rifles, but also Star Wars creatures like dewbacks and tauntauns. And in this era, right now, Fantasy Flight Games, like we talked about at the top of the show, in our rumors section and our news section, they have units from both the Clone Wars era and the Galactic Civil War. So I'll just jump up to my next one, which is another video game. The creme de la creme of Star Wars flight simulators. Flight simulators used to be a big video game category back in the 1990s. The F-14, F-15 Falcon games, Chuck Yeager's Flight Simulator for Microsoft Windows. These were huge video games, very, very big bestsellers, made tons of money for software companies, and were used by electronics retailers to showcase the hardware and software power of modern microcomputers, PCs. So of course, there were Star Wars versions of flight simulators where instead of flying aircraft, you would fly StarCraft. Excuse me, wrong game. You would fly spacecraft. And so mine is the third one of these, X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. This is, of course, the third part of a trilogy of games, starting with X-Wing, which was one of the best-selling Star Wars PC games of all time, followed up by TIE Fighter. And then, of course, if you've got one and the other, you just merge those engines and you have X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. This was also the beginning of local area network play, where you could connect computers together and players could face off at their individual workstations. And so you would have squadrons of X-Wings fighting against squadrons of TIE Fighters. This game was so successful that you had to sign up on waiting lists at the time to get copies of it ordered. Beautiful graphics for its day. It was part of what taught us how X-Wings and TIE Fighters actually worked, by emulating what happened in the scenes that we saw inside the cockpit in the movies. And they were so famous as a successful Star Wars game that we're basically getting a remake later this year with Star Wars Squadrons. Derrick, did you play any X-Wing or TIE Fighter?
Yeah, this was in my honorable mentions just because, again, it's such a huge part of my childhood, but I put Trilogy Arcade game in there just because, again, kind of that same concept, right? It's kind of that flight simulator style game, but this obviously was a little bit more detailed than what the Trilogy Arcade game provided. But obviously I thought the Trilogy Arcade game was just something I wanted to put in more as my top 7, just because it really immersed you. Obviously, like I said, if you got to sit down and you had the surround sound and the system.
Yep.
Unfortunately, you really didn't get that choice as a kid back in home playing in front of your computer, back on a round screen, round monitor screen. But yeah, you still got the effects. And just really enjoyed the heck out of this game. And it was one of the first games, again, where as the main storyline of the game, you actually got to play the bad guys, right? You got to play the dark side with TIE Fighter.
Yes, if you chose to go that way, you could join the Imperial Navy. Yeah. And also in the TIE Fighter game, there was like a secret Sith society where after your commanding officer gave you your mission, as you walked down the hall to go get in the hangar to jump in your TIE Fighter, there'd be this shadowy dude in a robe a la Sim Alu, or one of Palpatine's other advisors, who would have these various Sith tattoos, and he'd lean over and be like, "Hey, if you have a moment, I have something that the Emperor would like for you to see about." Or at the beginning, before you found out he was working for Palpatine, he would just say, "I have powerful friends that would like for you to help them, and they will make it worth your while." And over time, you could get tattoos on your forearm that was covered by your uniform, but when you went to the secret meetings, you could reveal them to show, "Hey, I'm a rank 6 or whatever member of the Sith Initiates," and that would sometimes get you access to new technologies, like a TIE Fighter with 3 wings. What the heck? A TIE Fighter with 3 wings? The TIE Defender, of course, being introduced in TIE Fighter.
Yeah. And just, like I said, it was just a lot of fun playing it. It was something different, right? And like I said, early on, I definitely played the heck out of this game.
Yeah. Nathan, did you do any of the flight sims?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I was not so big on computer gaming at that time. I really only did that for MMORPGs, but I do have on my list Rogue Squadron, which was made by Factor 5 and LucasArts, which was also for the N64. It was a great game. It was the first of 3 installments, but the first one, in my opinion, was the best. I know I've mentioned it before on this podcast, but you get to pilot X-Wings and TIE Fighters, and in my mind, that made it just as good as X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. You also
I won't say just as good, but I will say very good.
Well, at the time, this was my opinion. Yeah. I am, of course, very excited to play Squadrons when it comes out, because I do want to get that experience as well. But I definitely enjoyed piloting various Star Wars starfighters and going on missions. And there was a pretty good storyline too in the original Rogue Squadron. There was a defector who left the Empire and joined up with Rogue Squadron, and you had to. There was one particular mission where you had to use your ion cannons on your Y-wings to disable her ship, so that you could defeat her without blowing her up, so that she could defect. And then at the end of that mission, it would play this little cinematic where, well, the graphics weren't all that great at the time, but her interceptor would be flying across the screen, and she'd hail you and be like, "Hey, I want to defect and join the rebellion." So it was cool.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll jump in real quick and go kind of back to back with Nathan's mention of Rogue Squadron. One of the other Star Wars console games back in the 90s that I liked was Star Wars Rebel Assault. This was a bit like Rogue Squadron in that you controlled various craft. Not a flight simulator per se, so not that detailed or that precise, but you definitely got to sit in the cockpit of the Falcon or an X-Wing or whatnot and go through arcade-like levels. But one of the reasons I really liked Rebel Assault, this was in the era of the original PlayStation, the PlayStation 1, is that first of all, it used a good bit of, at the time, what we thought was really awesome full motion video technology to have like people in Star Wars costumes having filmed scenes for this video game, and then you sort of interacted with them in the way that you would when you played an old arcade game like Dragon's Lair or Space Ace. So you'd be watching almost a movie, a new Star Wars movie. Again, we all wanted that so badly at this time. A new Star Wars movie, and you would hit the button when the indicator flashed. So it was all about timing. You didn't have direct control. And you, in addition to flying the craft, you would occasionally land and get out, and you'd have to run around as a rebel pilot doing like commando type stuff. And you got to play this game on some of the most cutting edge home consoles at the time, including PlayStation 1, but also the Sega CD-ROM drive that attached to the bottom of your Sega Genesis. I still have a functioning Sega CD and a functioning Sega Genesis. My holy grail is finding a functioning copy of Rebel Assault to show my kids. It was really amazing to see someone dressed in the orange Rebel flight suit again, live action, or as much as it was with all the pixelated video back then. And then you'd wait until the button flashed, and you'd jump out from behind the corner, blast the stormtrooper, then jump back into cover. It taught me a lot of important lessons about taking cover when stormtroopers are involved, which have been useful for Star Wars Legion tabletop. And I'll go ahead and transition for you here, Derrick. Also useful for a tabletop game that is Star Wars that Derrick loves that involves cover, Imperial Assault from Star Wars group over at Fantasy Flight Games.
Yeah, so obviously I've been playing a bit of Legion, pre-COVID. It was something I'm not a huge fan of when it comes to the open miniatures. I like Imperial Assault a little bit better because it's kind of that board developed out there, and you've got the squares and you're limited to what you can do. But the main reason I have this as my favorite out of the miniature type of games is because it was 2 games in one. And really the first one that I really fell in love with the most with was the storyline RPG co-op version of it. So it was designed for a 2 to 5 player game where a player actually gets to play as the Imperial, and then the other player or players gets to play as the rebels that are trying to stop the Imperials. It was fun because it was just like a typical RPG where you gain experience as you complete missions. It's got miniatures that you got to paint. It had very cool multiple stories. They came out with multiple expansions and small box expansions. that really, you could just keep adding more and more. When you bought miniature figures, they had their each individual story that came with it, that you could take the tiles, and then you could just do whatever you wanted with it. You could design it. And then on top of that, then it had a PvP competitive mode where you could have, player versus player. And you got 3 factions. It wasn't just rebels versus the Imperials. You actually could have the mercenaries. So if you just wanted to play with the bounty hunters, or Jabba and his minions and stuff like that, you could play that. You could also combine them with the dark side, or the Imperials, or you could combine them with the rebels. So you could have a mixture too. So the rebels could actually hire some bounty hunters. So that was really cool. But just overall, I thought it was just very well put together. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed painting the models. It's again another unfortunate Fantasy Flight game that just lasted a few years, but they put out a lot of cool stuff for it all, and it was focused on the OG trilogy, which is what I really enjoyed the most in my Star Wars lore. So that was another cool aspect of the game. And then last but not least, I thought it was really cool that they were actually coming out with new versions via online downloads, where you didn't actually have to have anyone commanding the Imperials. You could just have yourself or friends play, and you'd actually play against the app version of the game, which was really cool. They created some new storylines for that, and then it was just a new way of approaching the game. And I know people have been working on creating their own content for it, so you can have fan service stuff, which is really cool. So the game continues to live on. I actually have a local friend who puts together a large, vast community across the U.S. that actually repointed the characters, because obviously as newer models came out, they kind of had that power creep thing. So a lot of the older models kind of lost their luster. So he came out with repointing configurations, which was really just, again, one of those games that I thought was really great way of immersing, because it took that role-playing game, it took the miniature game, it took the board game aspect to a whole new level. So it definitely is probably one of my most recently favorite Star Wars games.
The writer in me is very disappointed with myself right now. I transitioned well into Imperial Assault by talking about taking cover, but I completely missed the fact that I just transitioned from Rebel Assault to Imperial Assault. Come on, Scott, what are you doing? Anyway, so I will say I love Imperial Assault as the campaign mode a great deal more than the player versus player one-on-one, because this is one of the biggest and most longest running Star Wars tabletop campaigns that I've ever had the privilege to be a part of, thanks to one Dave Filcloni over there, Mr. Miracle, Gooey Chewy. Please regale us with a short summation of our Imperial Assault campaign from a few years ago, where we had 5 adults with children, 4 adults with children and Nathan, that met on a regular basis to play this game enough times to take a whole group of rebels through the entire first campaign. It's kind of miraculous when I think back on it. The bad guys won because Nathan was playing as the bad guys, and he's really good at being a game master. But we all had enough fun that we kept coming back, or else we're enough masochists that we kept coming back. Anyway, Nathan, I'll let you talk a little bit about how that campaign went. The players were myself, my friend Dave Abelson, our friend Dave Abelson, who unfortunately has moved to Florida. Unfortunate only in that we don't get to hang out with him anymore. He's doing great down there with his family. And Ryan, whose last name has absolutely escaped my head at the moment. But he also would come, and then Mita, my wife, would play. And then Nathan was the Imperial player. And we actually had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, that would be Ryan Sherwood.
Oh, thank you very much. It's going crazy.
Yes, so the short version of the story is that the Empire crushed your puny rebellion, as is the appropriate thing to do. I didn't bother watching Return of the Jedi. I assume the Jedi just returned in order to be crushed by Palpatine. Anyway, so in this game you get to pick various rebel heroes who aren't the main characters. They are other heroes within the rebellion. So you get to kind of create your own story, and that was a really cool aspect of the game. I did play one time as the Wookiee, whose name escapes me. It started with a G. Garish is something.
Yeah.
So that's an aspect of the game that I particularly enjoyed. When I played as the Imperials, I started off with a strategy that added stress tokens to all of the heroes. And that's actually a really effective way for the Empire to play, but it's not the most fun way, in my opinion, because what it really does is it makes it to where the rebels can't do their special things. And, well, that's not fun. You picked those characters because you wanted to do their special things.
Yeah.
So I kind of switched away from that eventually, less for my own personal reasons of wanting to crush the rebellion and more because I wanted the game to be fun.
Yeah.
I think if I had stuck
his-
with the you can't do anything, it just wouldn't have been fun.
Yeah, the Wookiee's name is Garkon.
Garkon.
Yeah.
I enjoyed playing him even though he wasn't exactly the best hero in the box, because melee characters in a game that focuses primarily on ranged combat usually isn't a great idea.
Right. The game had some rough points, like Nathan mentioned. If the Imperial player knew what they were doing and stacked everything, arranged everything properly, they could just utterly destroy the rebels, and they pretty much had no chance. And at the beginning of Fantasy Flight Games' tenure as the shepherd of Star Wars tabletop games, that was all too often the case. Dark Side was way overpowered compared to Light Side in a lot of their products. Thankfully, with Legion, they seem to have gotten a much better balance about that.
I completely agree with you, which is why Legion is on my list and Imperial Assault is not.
Yeah, I
did
didn't
enjoy the game, but Legion's better.
I didn't put Imperial
opinion.
Assault on my list either, but it would definitely have gotten a spot in my honorable mentions. We're running long in the tooth here on this episode, but we each have one game on our list that we want to talk about for a little bit here. But right before we do, I want to mention my number 7 game because I haven't had a chance to bring it up yet. That is Star Wars Pinball. And specifically, I'm talking about Star Wars Premium Pinball from the Stern Pinball Company. This game was made in, I believe, 2017. And this is one of those pinball machines. It's a physical pinball game. I'm not talking about the Nintendo version or the app, although those games are kind of fun. This is a physical pinball machine.
Nothing better than an actual physical pinball machine.
For sure. And in this game, you get to interact with a video screen that is at the top up near the scoreboard and recreate all the cool galactic Civil War era stuff.
Yeah, and then I've also got one more game on here too, Empire at War, because obviously back in the 90s, who didn't love strategy turn-based games, right? Where you had Age of Empire, you had the actual original Warcraft, you had StarCraft, Command and Conquer, all those games out there. So obviously Star Wars had to dip their toe into a similar strategy game with Empire at War, and I just remember playing this a lot of times. So it's just fun. So, but yeah, let's guys reveal our top game that we all put on our list here as our favorite Star Wars game of all time. So let's talk. And I know Kevin and I recorded a special snippets episode of this. So again, we'll make sure that you folks are able to do this. But our favorite game of all time, and even Nathan played this, so we know he's gotten around to it, is Star Wars, the customizable collectible card game by Decipher. So again, the games of the 90s, CCGs, any type of card game back then, most notoriously Magic or Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, those types of games that are still even going on to this day. But back in the 90s, Star Wars CCG was a game that I could not get enough of. Obviously, nowadays they have it on GEMP that you could play over the computer online, but nothing beat anything that I could think of that just had you sit down in front of another person and play Star Wars and recreate what was a fun game. Nathan, you have this on your list. Tell us a little bit about why you put Star Wars CCG on this list.
I put Star Wars CCG on this list, and it's in my top spot. I didn't really rank my games, but if I did, this one would be in the top spot because this game is the reason I am a Star Wars fan today. When I was in middle school, these collectible card games were spreading throughout the middle school as kind of the thing to do, and there were two big ones, Magic and Star Wars. And I started off playing Magic, but then in 1997, my dad took me to see A New Hope, the special edition in theaters. And I said, you know what? I like that. There's a Star Wars card game that's being played at my middle school, at J.T. Williams Middle School. And, why not play that instead of Magic? I like the pictures. I like the story. I like the movie. So why not play that game instead? And I went whole hog on that. I said, forget Magic, selling all my Magic cards, playing Star Wars instead.
You totally
It
made the
was
right choice.
Great. I did.
Well, he should have kept the Magic cards and just went straight to Star Wars. But yes, it was still fun.
Nah, they were all Ice Age Magic cards.
Oh yeah, I've got a few of those I'm trying to offload right now. They're worth like, there's maybe a few handful that are worth like $20, but most of them aren't.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. But Star Wars, man, that was where it was at. And I just loved playing. I got in at about Dagobah was the expansion that most recently come out. But it's great. And, a lot of the Star Wars trivia that I know from this game.
For sure.
All of those Cantina aliens, they all had their own individual cards in the card game. And, man, I would read and memorize the lore for all of those. And you could ask me about any Cantina patron. And I could tell you who they were, what they were doing, their backstory, all of that. And a lot of it was created for this game.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
It was great. I actually got in the local newspaper once for knowing some of this stuff.
For a trivia game?
Well, it sort of. When the Phantom Menace came out, it was later than the Phantom Menace. I can't remember if it was for Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith, but one of our local newspaper reporters put something in the paper asking, hey, if you know a lot about Star Wars, contact me and tell me some things that don't line up between the original trilogy and the prequels.
Nice.
But he wanted to make sure that the people who contacted him knew what they were talking about first. So he's like, hey, what can you tell me about Star Wars that proves your credentials of do you know Star Wars? I started listing off all of this stuff that I learned from the card game.
Good times.
And eventually I ended up with stuff like, well, the flight suit that Bo Sheck wears in the cantina is the same style of flight suit that Bosk wears on the bridge of the Executor. And the guy's just like, you know what? Just go ahead. You're in.
I trust
You're in. You got it. Yeah, you pass. You pass.
It is nerd alert radars going off, right? So
yeah.
I'm sure
it was great.
I had to step away from the cockpit for a few moments there, but I'm sure you guys talked a lot about the mechanics that made Star Wars CCG so groundbreaking.
No, Nathan's just going on about how he became a Star Wars fanatic because of the game and the context of the lore and all that stuff. So
I will be forever grateful to Star Wars CCG for a variety of reasons, but a big one is that it helped Nathan become a Star Wars fan, which is a bedrock part of our friendship. And so thank you, Decipher.
Yes.
Not
thank
only
you, Kevin
Wars
Reitzel.
Exactly.
But a gaming fan. This is also what got me into gaming at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, just the game itself, though, as you were starting to talk a little bit about, Scott, is just one of the best games out there because it just felt so somewhat thematic, but it's also one way of how it balanced the game due to cost systems and it always felt like there was a price to pay. Even if you were quote unquote winning the game, it still wasn't something where you could easily snowball effect. Obviously some decks kind of still felt that way against like operatives and stuff later on, and some of the power creep when they did the Reflections 2 and Reflections 3. But outside of that, though, the game just overall was very well balanced for dark side and light side. And again, it was just one of those games where you got to play the dark side, right? I mean, that's what everybody wanted. I mean, I remember out of the premiere set, right? Everybody wanted that Darth Vader because, he was so powerful and he was so cool looking. And just the way they released the sets was fun too, because it went from starting with the original movie, it went from of the original trilogy. It went from movie to movie. They had multiple sets, and then as Nathan mentioned, every card had game text about that character or about a special event or item that was in the game, and it was just so much fun. The quality of the cards was great. And it was just something you could pick up the game pretty quickly after a couple of times playing it. But overall, you could just, once you knew how to play, you could play the game in an hour, right? And that was after playing best of 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. And the Destiny system, the idea of revealing a card from the top of your deck and checking a certain number to simulate random number generation from what would have been like a die, is such a great Star Wars gaming concept that we've seen it continue throughout various iterations of other games from other companies, like Star Wars Destiny is all about random number generation within Star Wars card games. But the way that Decipher set up Star Wars CCG, such that it was all self-contained in those 60 cards for each light side deck and dark side deck, it was just beautiful, so well balanced. It encapsulated the idea of moving energy through your life force by having you move cards face down in stacks from your deck, using the cards within your deck as the resource that you must manage to play other cards, instead of using a card type that's in play as resources like Magic and all the Magic clones did at that time. Or tokens, or monies or whatever. Just so great. If you're a Star Wars fan and a big gaming fan, and you've never tried that game, I urge you to go check out the Star Wars CCG Players Committee. Their website does have free to download printable PDFs of learn to play decks that include classic Star Wars characters, and just such a great game.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, I still feel like had Decipher been able to maintain the license for Star Wars, it didn't go straight to Hasbro, as well as obviously the scandal that went on, which you can learn more about in our Snippets episode, where I talked to Kevin Reitzel, the man of one of the co-founders of the Fandom Podcast Network, actually worked for Decipher, where a lot of us know Kevin originally from back in the day from either Star Wars or Star Trek card games. But just overall, I think that game would have still. I mean, and it's great that the Players Committee still continues today. They try to put some virtual card games out, or cards out there. But just overall, I still think the physical game is it's so well balanced. It's just a lot of fun.
The engine is so well made, the rules so well set up, that even after they lost the license to create Star Wars cards, Decipher came out with a game called Wars that was a original property science fiction game that used the same rule system with a couple of tweaks. And even it sold well enough to have 2 sets. So that, without the star power of Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, and those guys behind it, it's just such a fun game.
Yeah, I think if Decipher had managed to keep the license, they probably would have at some point made a second edition of that game using the rules that they used for Wars. Because as Scott mentioned, it was a very similar rule set. They just streamlined it a little bit and made some tweaks that really improved the gameplay, but without Luke and Vader and all of the great Star Wars lore behind it. It just didn't catch quite the popularity that the Star Wars version did.
There was also the talks that they would have done what they did with Young Jedi. It was supposed to be the next one too, but that game was just terrible.
Yeah.
Well, that game wasn't that bad. It's just that our standard at the time was the Star Wars CCG.
Yeah,
and that's
a similar
such a high standard.
Yeah, a similar thing happened to Fantasy Flight Games with their first attempt at a Star Wars card game, which was called very originally Star Wars the Trading Card Game. Just Star Wars the Card Game.
The card game.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So bland that I couldn't even remember the correct wording. It was not a terrible game, but comparing it to Star Wars CCG from Decipher, it was dog crap.
Yeah, Scott had to refrain from going too much into Wookiee territory there, but
it was. Anyway, so before we go, my beautiful bride actually contributed to the content for today's episode because I mentioned to her that we were doing top 7 Star Wars games of all stripes. And she's like, I think I actually have a list of 7 Star Wars games that I've played. And I'm like, well, great. So here's Mita's top 7.
Well, they're not all Lego, right?
They're not all Lego. They're not all Lego. No.
But are some of them Lego?
well, hang on. Here we go. Number 7, she did rank them. So number 7, Star Wars Trivial Pursuit. This is the old gold box Trivial Pursuit.
Which I still have sealed.
Yep, that came out around the time before the Phantom Menace was about to come out and had R2-D2 as a digital dice roller. So you'd push his head, you'd go beep, boop, 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 and he'd show a LCD, of the number you rolled. So good stuff. The hard mode is you play it where to earn the pie piece, you have to answer a question about the Phantom Menace. Now, this was super hard because the Phantom Menace wasn't out yet. Good times. Number 6, Star Wars Monopoly. Number 5.
Which I still have sealed.
Yes. Destiny. Number 4, Star Wars Pinball. Number 3, Imperial Assault. Number 2, Star Wars Lego, The Complete Saga, 1 through 6. And for her, number 1 was Star Wars The Old Republic MMO, because she played the mess out of that game with us in our guilds, so our fleets. So
she still plays with you guys, too?
She does, yes. So thank you very much, Mita, for contributing to the show today. We always appreciate when our fans and supporters give us their input.
Yes, and when we release this episode, we'll want to have people respond, telling us some of their favorite games of all time of Star Wars. So whether you agree or disagree with us, leave a comment, leave feedback. We're most appreciative when, our fans, our listeners do that.
Totally. So speaking of sending us feedback, Nathan, where can people find you on the social media?
You can find me on Facebook under my real name, Nathan Miracle, or you can find me on Twitter under Gooey Chewy, or I should say @Gooey Chewy. And Derek, where can people find you?
Find me on Twitter @HoodieDM83, and then obviously on the Facebook under my real name, Derek Marsh, and obviously spend time on the Facebook group at What a Piece of Junk. And Scott, where can the listeners find you?
So I'm on Facebook under my real name, Scott Baltman. I'm on Twitter as @ScotticusMax. And if you want to find out about my own science fiction novels, you can check out my author website, which is writegreatscott.com. And so we definitely want to thank all of our listeners for listening to this episode. Please remember to hit us up with your thoughts, reviews, comments, or suggestions, whatever it is that we can do to help make this podcast more enjoyable. Remember, always respect each other's fandom. All right, Nathan, punch it.